All right, hi again. Welcome back to another episode of Love, Growth, and Freedom with Adrian Duarte. Okay, now on our season 6, I know if you've been on this journey, we've been talking about mistakes, okay? We've been talking about allowing ourselves to make mistakes, being able to understand leaving a room of margin and error that we are allowed to make mistakes as humans and that we have to learn from them. Now, on this episode, we are going to talk about the best lessons that come from our mistakes. After having a mindset that we are allowed to make mistakes, that we can make mistakes, and we are gonna make mistakes in our lives as we try and figure out how to live our lives and make sense out of the whole thing, we are going to always make mistakes. Now, on this episode, we are gonna have to understand what are the best lessons that we get to learn from these mistakes. Now, we have to realize that some of these lessons in life come from these mistakes because these have changed us and has forced us to open our hearts to growth. Now, I want to discuss that this episode will be dealing with a more personal approach because we are going to talk about a lot of the mistakes that I've had in my life that really changed me and the lessons that I learned from it. But before that, I would have to tell you, how do we understand or how do we get to this point of being able to acknowledge these wonderful mistakes? I call them beautiful mistakes because these mistakes have brought me to a light, to a place where I get to be someone I want and I love looking at in the mirror now, being able to understand that these mistakes have shaped me to become the person that I am today. Now, it takes a lot of processing and a lot of things that you have to discover and rediscover about yourself as you go through this. Now, we were talking about in the past episode that learning from the mistakes that we made needs to have a reflection, needs to have something that we go deeper. Now, if you are going to take another extra mile from preventing yourself making that mistake, from improving yourself as a person and sharing this to other people, then you are at the very moment that we are going to discover the best lessons. That's the moment where you're going to rediscover about, okay, this mistake was then supposed to happen for you to understand this certain moment in your life and understand that lesson forever. You know what I mean? So for all and for a lot of us, we don't get to understand these mistakes if you don't really reflect on it. Now, in this episode, we are going to talk about that. Acknowledging the emotions and lessons is the first thing that you have to understand when it comes to realizing that this probably or some of those lessons that we've had in our lives that came from mistakes are the best lessons that you learned. Because if we didn't make a mistake, we didn't make this mistake, we wouldn't be the person that we are today. Since we have learned from our mistakes, we have to acknowledge now the emotions that came along after committing these, and so do the lessons. Now, you have to really keep in mind that the feelings that were associated in that, the feelings, the shame, the guilt, the hatred that you felt for yourself experiencing that mistake, the fear, the anxiety that came along with it, is part of it. You have to acknowledge that this happened. This mistake was something that cost you that. Now, if you hold on to that, hold on to it and say, okay, this is the feeling that I don't want to remember anymore. A feeling that I don't want to experience again in my life. Now, you're going to take it with it, a lot of, processing. You're going to reflect on that and you're going to be like, I'm not going to let this happen, not just to me, but to other people around me. That's one thing. I'll tell you all about that later. Understanding that the idea, although we have to learn from it, we have to take it and ponder the lessons it provides us. What are the key changes in our lives we have to make, and what are the biggest takeaways from that mistake? Now, reflecting, you're done reflecting. This is the part where you are going to take the few steps forward in changing the way that you live around that mistake. Now, I'm going to tell you a story. So, growing up, I am a hateful person. I hated people. I hated bullies. I hated straight dudes who would bully me, or even before they bully me, I already put up this wall and I'm like, I don't want to be friends with straight dudes because they're gonna bully me and all the like. So I was always like that. To a point where I was irrationally mad. So one of the biggest mistakes I've had in my life was I was in senior high school, fourth year high school, and I was very, very mad at the world. I didn't get a lot of things. I didn't get a lot of things in my way. And I was dealing with a lot of internal struggles with my own self. And I thought everyone was out to get me. Even the friends that I made throughout high school, I thought they were out to get me. And then whenever that they tried to help me, whenever they tried to reach out for me, to me, I'd always act like a victim. I'll always act like a scorned dog that's gonna bite the hand that tries to help me and feed me because I was scared. And if I were to be honest, that thing that happened to me strained my relationships with these people that we called friends, and I kind of lost a real connection with them. It kind of strained that relationship. Instead of being able to come back to those friendships, I was successful at isolating myself and being able to not put myself back in that situation. And that was wrong. And it was all because of me. It was all because I thought they were out to get me. Because which is weird. I just felt like they were out to get me and I didn't have anybody. And that was a mistake because that's not true. They're really out there to help me, and there was so much misunderstanding, and I did not give them a chance to actually explain. And I always took them by heart and in offense all the things that they're doing. And that was a mistake I had to learn. It was because of insecurity and because of anxiety and all the things that I'm dealing with. And probably, yeah, it's not an excuse. Even if I was dealing with my own crisis within myself, it was not an excuse for me to lash out on them and bring out the hate towards them because I felt secluded and I felt like I was being deliberately isolated. And all it was just a misunderstanding. And then, like, it then became something in my head, and then I put fire wood in that fire. So it started with, like, I discovered that they had a group chat behind me, but I think that group chat was made to actually you know help me out. They were talking about how to reach out to me, to talk to me, and deal with the things that I was going through and how they were going to help me. And then what I did was, instead of just understanding or asking them upfront to do that, was I tried to go behind their, like, not behind their backs. So I was also trying to gain sympathy. Like, I was getting the sympathy vote, and it was a very young life that I had, very dramatic, I guess. So I tried to get the sympathy vote. Oh, they're not including me. Oh, whatever. Like, dumb bitch. So I learned from that. Like, that was one of the biggest mistakes I've done in my life, but it taught me the best lessons in life because after that, I learned how to trust other people, and I learned how to communicate myself more after what happened. And I was able to understand that not all people have the same way of dealing with problems. And it just opened my eyes. So I did, I hated myself for that. I hated myself for that mistake. I felt upset that I kind of ruined something really good. I self sabotaged it. And I think a lot of us relate to that because we self sabotage a lot of our relationships because we think that they're always out to get us. We think that they're always trying to outmaneuver us or whatever. But that was never the case. They were probably just, they don't really just know how to handle or be with you at that moment. So sometimes we really have to take the time to communicate. So what I did was, it took me a while to understand that, and it took me some help. I went to my guidance counselor. She explained to me what felt like and what their side was, and I was like, oh, I blew things out of proportion. And I did my best to apologize. I said I was sorry, and I'm like, okay. And even if we were okay afterwards, but it never became the same bond that we used to have before the whole fiasco. But I learned from that. I was able to develop better relationships after because I took that into consider. I took that by heart. That not just I did not just reflect that, oh, I made a mistake and that's it, and I'm not gonna do it again, and I'm gonna try to open up. I actually did try my best to actually relearn how to communicate myself, to take another extra mile, to be able to deal with my own stuff first, and to to actually train my mind to be curious first before of creating scenarios in my head and reaching down into conclusions and all the like. So I again we to put it into perspective, as we talk about here, is that we do make mistakes in our lives, and sometimes we really don't mean making them, and it's okay. And sometimes when we learn from them, as the more that you dig deep into it, the more that you understand it, the more that you realize something about yourself that you never really truly understood before committing that mistake. Now that you know it, you're able to change for the better. And now, I guess those lessons that allow you to recalibrate your person and becoming of who you are is one of the best lessons that you can get from your mistakes. Like mistakes really do shed a light on the things that we have to learn in our lives. Okay? Some of my biggest mistakes made the biggest impacts and changes in my life. So that was what I was trying to say to you. Because I won't always be right in any aspect of my life. I'm never gonna be correct all the time. And to all of you listening here, the things that I'm saying is not always true and correct. And maybe not for you. Maybe for me it is. Maybe for others it isn't. And it's really just like that. Life is like that because the world keeps on turning, and everything that we're gonna do, somehow we are always gonna have to learn and relearn new things. So things will be there will be people that would know better, and things are always going to change. So I will be making mistakes. We all are. The things that I realized, the biggest mistakes I've made, gave me lessons and urged me to become better, urged me to change a part of me that I never knew was a little off, or was a little bad. I didn't like the toxic traits that I have. Not being able to keep my mouth shut cost me a friend. I shared that story earlier in the third episode. And now I hold secrets with utmost care and void of what I think is right. So I try my best to change. I try my best to understand that what isn't mine to tell isn't mine to tell. And I've always been comparing myself to the life of others, and I was freaking miserable. And that was on me now. So I do my best to redirect myself from comparing. Now, on this one, I put that in the bullet because I want to talk to you about this. So now this one, I used to be a person that was never happy. I was happy. I was like the fake happy. I was happy in front of everybody. I'm happy. I'm happy like this. I'm happy like that. But deep inside, I wasn't truly happy because I kept comparing myself to others. I used to do this a lot, and I guess my ex got really, strung up on this one. But I keep telling him that, oh, at 25, this is all I can do. My friends have this at this age. They do this already. I see people at this age, they do this, but I can do that too. Why can't I have that? And I mean, I always compared everything. I never saw what I had. I never felt happy with the things that I had. And then until I realized, and then until I lost all those things, then I realized that I kind of threw them away and took them for granted because I never was happy with what I had. I always had to look at other people's hands, other people's lives to be like, oh, I want that. Why can't I have that? And I lost a lot of things because of that kind of trait. And that changed me for the better. That was the best lesson I learned in life, that I was doing that. And I was like, oh, that was a mistake. And I lost a lot of people. I lost a lot of friends because of that. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I got to like recalibrate my existence, that to understand and reshift the focus of my self-worth, that these things that they have is for them, and that I have my own pace. And that was the light bulb moment that I had to shift my mindset for growth. Instead of just competing with other people, I had to like reach deep down within myself and find what actually works for me and what makes me happy exactly, and not comparing myself to other people's life. And that really took a lot of strength, and that took a lot of the sadness and misery away, and I became really truly genuinely happy, like up until now. So whenever I see myself comparing now, I didn't just stop and say I'm not gonna repeat that mistake and that's it. And I did not acknowledge that I'm gonna make comparing mistakes again. What I did was I knew and I understood that it's always gonna come. It's always gonna be something that I'm gonna compare myself to somebody. But then I have protocols in my head now that whenever I compare, I have to bring myself back into the present and understand that what I'm doing right now, I am where I'm supposed to be, and I'm happy, and I'm not supposed to be thinking that far ahead. I know I have plans, and I know I am putting in the work. I have to just focus on making the best of what I have each and every day, living it day by day. Now, see, these are the best lessons that I've learned with the biggest mistakes I've made in my life, and cost me a lot of people in relationships. Okay? So, on a serious note, that those are the things that, other than just reflecting on it, there is a shift in your life when you understand that these mistakes are more. And so these are the best lessons that I know. Like, mistakes give you that. Okay, so that's why we shouldn't be afraid of mistakes. We shouldn't look at mistakes as a really, really bad thing. It is somehow, but it isn't the end of your life. It doesn't end there. It doesn't end and doesn't define who you are. You make mistakes. You change for the better. It's not that you make a mistake and you stay the same way. That's a choice, honey. That's a choice. Now, one of the things I do that actually helped me so much, that's why I have protocols in my head. I write things down. I write the lessons down in my head. I share it. I do it on TikTok. I am able to like relive all those and understand and remember and remind other people that these are mistakes that somehow we commit in our lives. And we have to be aware of that. And that's me. That's why I write. That's why I do content. That's why I share these things with you. It's because this what felt right for me. These mistakes has brought me to become who I am today, and I'm proud of that. So now you know more and know where you've made some changes. Share it out to the world so that they could also learn and avoid some of the mistakes you made. So when you're done understanding that these are the best lessons you've also had in life, share it with other people. Maybe they learn from you. Maybe they can use it in their own lives, and maybe it will help them. Certainly I just want to be honest. I started the whole TikTok thing. So if you're from TikTok who followed me on my Spotify, or if you've been following my podcast ever since, I want to say thank you. And yeah, the podcast was born out of those mistakes. The podcast, my TikTok was born out of those mistakes. Those moments where I had to remind myself of not to compare. Those moments that I had to like remember who I am and happiness I have and all the likes are made and born out of those mistakes. And if I didn't make these mistakes, I wouldn't be able to share it with you. I wouldn't have something to talk about. I wouldn't have something to share and teach you about. So sometimes all we really have to see is yes, mistakes have its bad nature, but it doesn't mean it has to be entirely bad. It is what you make of it as well. It's lemons. Make lemonades out of it. And I'm squeezing it out. I'm teaching all of you. And then I've been doing really fun. So, yeah, I mean, that's all. I think that I will end on that note that your mistakes will not define who you are forever. So don't be afraid to make them. Because the only thing that mistakes do to you when are always so afraid to make them is that you're not really going to live a life that you actually want because you're afraid of making these mistakes. That these mistakes are going to be made and done whenever you try something new, whenever you try to reach for your goals and the dream life that you want to have. Now, you already know that we're always going to make mistakes. You're equipped with the things that you need to do to learn from these mistakes. And I hope by now that you are courageous enough to take risks for you and your life. And if it turns out that it's wrong, it's okay. Try again. Pick yourself up. Get back up on your feet and try again. Because with these mistakes, you would understand what's the next step now. What are the next things that you have to learn from? Yeah, now that's passion. I felt myself there. Thank you for being here. I love you, lovies. Thank you so much for sharing this space and time with me as always. And again, this podcast is in partnership with Guerilla Podcast Syndicate. And if you want to listen to me more, join me on my Instagram, my TikTok, Fresh FM Adrian, and also my Facebook. So check me out there. And I also have a radio show on freshfm.com or .com ph. No, freshfmph.com. You can check it out there. And you can listen to me every Mondays to Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. And we talk about it's Project Q. We talk about self-worth and self-improvement and all that. It's the same thing that we do here on our podcast. So thank you. Thank you for being here. If you want to connect, join me on my Facebook group also, Project Q, and say hi. And we have a group chat and all the likes. So I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for the space. Thank you for the time. And thank you for your ears. I appreciate you. Sending some love. Thank you. This is AD of Love, Growth, and Freedom. And I'll see you again next time.